In this next text set, you are reading our short stories for the Harlem Renaissance Unit from Zora Neale Hurston and Neale Larson. So Zora Neale Hurston is one of the big names in the Harlem Renaissance as a writer, and she is writing about her experiences, or not her own experiences, but she's influenced by her own experiences in the South. She grew up in Florida, in Eatonville, and you'll learn more about her influence on that community in the next video, but she had a background in anthropology. She had studied anthropology under some very notable people in the field, and she approached her writing as with that in mind. So in a lot of her work, she is considering the idea of sort of protecting the integrity of and embracing and sharing those pieces of her community and culture as an African American woman, as a Southerner, that she felt were of this anthropological cultural significance, or she's using that to influence her work and craft her style as part of that tradition. This led to some sort of an interesting relationship between her and the majority of the Harlem Renaissance community. Number one, she did not always, her work was not always as highly regarded in the Harlem Renaissance community as some other names in the community. So her most famous novel is Their Eyes Were Watching God, and in that novel, she uses dialect, just like she does in Sweat. It also, when it came out, there was a lot of sort of discord about her representation of her community. Remember, part of the conversation people are having at this point in time is how are we representing our identity? How are we reflecting the Black experience? We don't want that to be designed for white people. We want that to be reflective of our experience. With no apologies. And that was how many in the Harlem Renaissance community felt. And Zora Neale Hurston's experiences and her stories that she shared did not always, to some in the community, do that. So Richard Wright, who is another big name during this movement, when her novel Their Eyes Were Watching God came out, he actually wrote in a review that he basically ripped it apart in the review, but he said, there's no theme, no message. It is not addressed to the Black audience, but to a white audience whose chauvinistic tastes she knows how to satisfy. She exploits that phase of life which is quaint, the phase which evokes a piteous smile on the lips of the superior race. So, and this is another member of the Harlem Renaissance who is, sort of slamming her novel as trying to appeal to or convey this idea of Black experience that white people would appreciate. Now, he later changed his tune and came to appreciate her novel, as did the American literary canon at large. It's considered one of the greatest American novels of all time. However, that it's an interesting thing to note in terms of the diversity among the Harlem Renaissance community and how, there were a lot of different ideas about how this self-assertion of identity was going to work. Zora Neale Hurston, if you're interested, did not care at all about the criticism. She saw herself as a regional writer as much as a writer in the Harlem Renaissance. She was writing about her experience. Her experience very much informed the different things that are involved in her novels. Her stories often also sometimes dealt with things that, maybe weren't things that other writers in the Harlem Renaissance wanted to be the focus of the art at the time. And some would argue that there's probably an element of gender here as well. Richard Wright and many of the voices in the Harlem Renaissance community were Black men, and Zora Neale Hurston was writing about a Black woman's experience. And, from her position in society, she is not only affected by this great racial conflict and an oppression, but she is also affected by gender oppression as well. And that plays a role in how she conveys her stories and lives in her experience in Their Eyes Were Watching God and in Sweat, which you are going to read.